If you're like me, you probably have moments where you wonder, why do I keep screwing up my life? You have days when things are going really well, but then you have and days when you're doing all the good stuff, but then you screw it up. Maybe it's that bad habit or the things that you say to people. Anyway, I'm going to tell you a story, an embarrassing story of when I screwed something up with one of my kids and how this revealed to me a deeper reason why we keep messing up our lives. And I'm going to suggest a way out of it, a way forward, so we don't just get stuck in a loop of repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Hopefully, it's going to be really helpful to you. Welcome to A Little Nudge. My name is Derek, and for the last 3 decades, I've been helping people explore faith and deepen their faith. And in these videos, I just give you tools and insights and little nudges to help you live a deeper and a more meaningful life. I bounced up the path to my front door. It'd been a really good day and I was in a great mood. And it just got better because I got a ping on my phone to say I had a new booking for my room off Airbnb that night, that I would rent my room out to make a bit of X money. And it was so easy. I kept the room tidy always and the room shut. So whenever anyone was ready, they could just come and it was no extra work for me. Entered into the house, took all my shoes off and that. I went up the stairs just to check that the room was absolutely fine. Now, a little bit of backstory here. You need to know that there'd been a bit of a conflict between me and my kids around shoes. And for some reason, what would happen is my teenage kids, would walk in the house and we'd had a rack of shoes right at the front door. And they'd look at that rack of shoes where they're supposed to keep their shoes. And they'd walk straight past it and they'd go into the front room and they'd take off one shoe and place it in the middle of the front room. And then they'd head up into the back room, the dining room, and place another shoe in the corner there. And I would come in, I'd get so annoyed and I'd say, come in, take your shoes off. It's not my job to tidy off after you. And then they'd complain that they couldn't find their shoes because they couldn't know where I'd put them. And we'd have this kind of ongoing issue. And anyway, it'd been fine for a few days and we hadn't had many fights about it. And I walked up into the bedroom and I just peeked to check that this Airbnb room was clean and tidy. And there on the floor was two white trainers. They weren't even next to each other. One was right in that corner and one was right in that corner. And from being in a really good mood, happy mood, just this trigger, this switch inside, and right, you could almost see me go from red from my shoes to my head. I just kind of exploded. I got the shoes. My kids weren't in. They'd gone out somewhere. Got to the top of the stairs and I was going to take them down to where they are kept at the bottom. And I was like, stuff it. I'm not carrying them all the way downstairs to come back up. And I just threw them down the stairs instead. One of them went down the stairs and it hit the wall. It landed on the edge of the radiator and landed on the floor. Now, you need to understand that these were brand new trainers for my son. They were super expensive, top of the range, and he'd been working hard part-time in a restaurant saving up money. And when they'd landed on the radiator, a rip had gone right down the side. I didn't see it at the time, but my son come in later and he sees his trainers are ripped. So he's gone bananas at me. And then I'm gone bananas at him because he's left his shoes on the top. And there's this kind of standoff. He wants me to pay for the trainers. I'm just saying that's an outrageous claim. And there's just this simmering for weeks between us. And it took me weeks, if I'm honest, it took me months to get to the point to accept that actually it may not have been the right thing to do to destroy somebody's property just because they left the trainers in the wrong room. And I could give you loads of examples where my reactions and my behavior haven't been what I've wanted them to be. And I've made New Year's resolutions. I've made kind of plans around my health and my spirituality, in my marriage or in my workplace or with money. There's just kind of a litter of decisions that I've made or reactions that haven't been what I've wanted to do. It's like I've got this tendency inside to screw this up. And I don't think that I'm the only one. I mean, if you've been married a long time and you see a couple get married and they're so in love and you say, well, it's going to be quite hard sometimes. And they're like, yeah, I know it's going to be quite hard. But they've just got no idea how much they're going to hurt each other. So you got a new parent and they've had a child for the first time and they're so excited and they've had the child and they're just like so amazed and they're so happy. And you say, well, it's going to be tough on some days. And they say, yeah, no, it's going to be tough on some days, but I love them so much. They've got no idea about the depths of despair and the hurt at some point they're going to give each other. Or take like lottery winners. Do you know what I mean? People win the lottery and half of them screw themselves up because of what money does and how they decide. Or imagine that you've had like problems at work and team and there's a lot of conflict and then somebody leaves and someone else arrives and it's a new team and the team makes commitments to each other, and we're going to be supportive and encouraging and not critical, and they say all the right things and maybe make some rules and agreements, and everyone feels so fresh and certain that this is a new season. But it's only a matter of time before that team hurts each other and lets each other down, that this tendency, this bias within us is going to come out. And although in our minds we can know that, whenever there's a new start, we completely forget it. You get to the 1st of January and you make some new year's resolutions, which are exactly the same as the one last year and the year before. Or when I don't know if you've ever explained to somebody who's maybe got a repeat pattern of behavior, and you challenge them about it and they'll say, oh yeah, I promise I'm never going to do that again. We have this kind of denial about it. And unless we face this tendency within us to screw things up and be brutally honest about it, we're never going to be able to move forward. And I've been really helped by some words of Jesus. And I'll tell you what they are in a minute, but I need to warn you, he uses a word that we don't like. He talks about this word sin, but most of us got like an emotional reaction, a trigger. This word has been distorted in our culture, and people are not really very happy about it. But when you look at actually what it is, it's like so helpful for us. And there's this moment where Jesus is talking about it, and it's this idea that there's something like deeply off in our heart, something not right within us. And it's not just that we do terrible things, but actually sometimes we want to do things that aren't even that great. And there's a moment where Jesus is talking about sin and sinners, and he's talking about why he's come to earth. And he's getting challenged by some of the religious people and the moralist of his day. He was always getting into trouble. And there's one moment in Mark 2:17 where they're challenging him. And Jesus says this, he said, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, it's the sick who need a doctor. He's given this idea that sin isn't just something that we do, that it's actually a spiritual disease. It's a kind of condition. Some of the other writers of the New Testament talk about being in sin. Sin isn't just like when we make a mistake or we do something wrong. It's like a condition of our soul. It's like something we are in. And I found that like so helpful. It just kind of helps me understand myself so much, and it helps me point a way forward. So, like, what Jesus is doing is saying that sin is more than breaking the rules. It's more than being guilty and maybe we need to be punished or what for not doing right things. He's saying our problem is much deeper than that. So when we make resolutions, when we decide, oh, I'm not going to do that anymore, I'm not going to be like that, yeah, this time it'll be different. Actually, we're not acknowledging that the issue is much deeper. It's a condition that we're in. It's like a spiritual disease, a spiritual cancer, as you were, that's kind of inside us. And that can be very liberating because it stops being so judgmental, doesn't it? I mean, if you go to the doctor and the doctor looks at you and does some tests and looks inside and says, actually, yeah, I've seen that you've got a liver condition. He's not being judgmental. He's just stating reality. So when we say that we're sinners, we're not being judgmental. In a sense, we're just stating the reality, the honesty of the situation that we're in and how serious it is. Jesus then goes on to explain what the solution is in a way. In a way, he positions himself as the doctor. If sin is a spiritual disease, a tendency within us to screw things up, then we need spiritual healing and we need wholeness. And Jesus points for how we might get that. And I mean, if you're new to the channel and you want to subscribe, if this is really helpful, then I would really appreciate that. Like it, give comments and join in the conversation below. That would be really great for me. But one of the ways we journey towards this wholeness is through the practice of confession. Now, confession and repentance get a bit of a bad rap in the church, and there's lots of negative reactions because they feel like quite abusive sometimes. But in a sense, confession, I mean, it's more than saying sorry. It's kind of opening your wounds to the physician, to the doctor, if Jesus' analogy is right. And it's interesting in like AA, one of the great transformation movements of our time, they always begin with, hi, my name is X and I'm an alcoholic. They start with brutal honesty about who I am and where I am. And in a sense, that's what confession is, because the more we hide, the less we heal. Yeah, the more we hide, the less we heal. Healing begins by bringing things into the light and actually naming our illness. So the practice of confession, where we maybe just spend a moment in silence, bringing towards God who we really are. Or maybe you're on a walk or journaling, or maybe when you're in a Christian community and as you're worshiping, you just bring honestly failures and who you are. And that doesn't need to be judgmental, remember. That's just like honestly laying ourselves open to the great spiritual doctor. And for some of us, we need more than just the presence of God. We need that to be mediated by other people, by friends, to just be honesty, or being in a community where we can actually say what we're struggling with. There's a great verse in 1 John 1:9 where John, one of Jesus' followers, one of his closest friends, writes that if we confess our sins, if we lay openly our honesty before God, he will forgive us. But then he has an interesting line and he says, and he will cleanse us. Yeah, he'll forgive us, but he'll also cleanse us. It's like John realizes that it's not just about doing wrong things, but how they distort us inside, and that we need a much greater fix than our willpower, than self-help, than new plans. Actually, we need spiritually God to come within and to change us and transform us from the inside out. So whenever you're trying to beat yourself up and you're aware of your failure, how you screwed up, why don't you just carry around this image that you're the patient and Jesus is the doctor? That actually you're in a condition that we call sin, where we're spiritually screwed up. We've got this spiritual disease that gives us a bent towards behavior that is harmful to us and to other people. And why don't you just imagine in prayer you're coming into the doctor's room and you open yourself up, and you're no longer hiding, you're no longer pretending to be better than you are. You're saying, actually, this is what I thought, Jesus. This is what I said. This is how I delighted in the failure of others. This is how I greedily wanted more. This is how I lost my temper with my kids, whatever it might be. And you just honestly bring it before Jesus, because the less we hide, the more we heal. And one of the things that we often struggle with is a sense of guilt and a sense of shame when we start to think about the things that we struggle with and things that we're doing wrong. And you might want to check out this video, because I struggled with self-worth for a long time. And in this video, I just talk about how I managed to get fixed. And I think that would be a really helpful follow-up if that's something that you struggle with. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.